help keep our water healthy and
Okay, you been going to more games, more current games? Oh, really? Wow, that's where I'm from. Wow. Oh, is that like the remnants of the tropical storm or hurricane, or was that different? Oh, really? Where was it actually in North Carolina? Oh, I see. Carry, okay. Huh? Is it a new stadium? It wasn't RBC Arena where the Hurricanes play, right? Was it? I went to a Mizzou football game like that one time where it was a big rain delay, so everybody left, and it was a fraction of the people who started, which is really cool. Holy moly! Yeah, they've had really low attendance all season. That's a typical White Sox game, right? Oh my goodness. 140? No, 145. That's pretty low.
Doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it's gonna be for sure.
That's how my high school team was. Yep. It was like our high school and our rival high school were like the two worst teams in our division.
It made the rivalry even more cutthroat at the end of the season.
And it was so
Negative
dumb.
scoring, negative scores or something.
Yeah, our football teams were trash. Our basketball teams were pretty good.
Yeah, we'll go ahead. All right. Call the North Kansas City Equity and Inclusion Committee meeting to order at about 7:03. Today is Thursday, September 12th. And we'll go ahead and do a call to order. Ryan Brooks.
Here.
Jennifer Boyd apparently is out at this point. Sorry. Bess Bailey.
Here.
Daniel Trotter is here. Martin Newton.
Here.
And Marcia is out. So we got 4. I think we have a quorum, right? We can go ahead and do we not?
We were waiting on legal to get back to us, and we never got a response. So, unclear.
Okay.
I don't think we're voting.
So this would be a work session, technically.
Sorry, I wasn't talking to the mic. If there are recommendations or whatnot, we can still take those forward to the council regarding the ordinance. So
That sounds good.
yeah,
All right. So doesn't appear that we have any guests. We have established that there's 2 voting members who are absent. And at this point, I don't believe we can move to approve the minutes, so we will table that until next session. And I don't believe we'll have any comments from the public, which quickly brings us to item 5. And that is the review of ordinance 9663, which Mike had sent us, I believe, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago to review.
correct. That was at the request of Councilmember Saper. It was on a I forget the it was council meeting 2 two council meetings ago. The second one in August, it was a recommendation that it be brought to the EIC just for a review. So Chief Freeman's not able to be with us tonight, but Major Holm, sorry, is with us to kind of give you a little background on the recommended amendment to the ordinance, and then answer any questions. But it's all right, we'll kind of kick into that.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, I think if Justin wants to share the recommendation, then maybe for those of us who weren't super familiar with the old ordinance, I know I had a couple questions, but if you want to share your all's update, I think most of us have read it.
Not the first time. So, has everybody had an opportunity to review the ordinance at least? Okay.
Yes.
So the idea behind the ordinance is that currently private businesses or homeowners, property owners have recourse for anybody that would decide to set up an encampment on their property. But we don't have that same course of action if they were to decide to set up an encampment on, okay. Yeah, if they were to decide to set up an encampment on public property or public right-of-way. And so the amendment to the ordinance is essentially just a protection for the city if somebody were to decide to set up that encampment in one of those areas. So what was sent out, it includes the current ordinances. And so you see the temporary shelters prohibited. So that's going to be setting up tents or temporary shelters in public parks only. So that does not cover the public right-of-way, sidewalks, anything along those lines. And then the second ordinance there that we currently have is town square hours. So again, it's limited to just town square, but not any of the public right-of-ways, any public property around City Hall, any other property owned by the city. And then you have the hours for other public places and tents, et cetera, in public places, which that limits to between the hours of 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. So you are still open from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. where there could be potential encampments on those public right-of-ways. And so the amendments to the ordinance are just to address those gaps in what we currently have.
When was the original ordinance created? Or how long, I should say, how long has it been in practice? Does it have it on there? I tried to find a date.
If you look into the municipal code that's online, if anybody has internet access up there, it'll pull up. Yeah, the dates will pull up in there. See how old these are. Town square hours, that was September 17th of 2019. And then hours for other public places was also September 17th of 2019. So they're fairly recent.
Okay. And one more question, and if that's all right, and chime in if others have questions for sure. Do you all deal with, or do you have to issue warnings for those kinds of things very frequently? Or is that during your time? And I don't know, forgive me for not knowing how long you've been with the department, I'm sorry.
As far as the parks go, that is a call that our officers will respond on pretty frequently, and that's just one of the things. The parks already have shelters that are in place, and so it's a pretty attractive spot for people to go, especially after parks closing hours. So we do go out to those areas often. As far as encampments in other areas, if it's on private property, we do get calls fairly often for, actually, case in point, over the weekend, I was down here eating a volcano, and I was speaking to the business owner down there because he had a gentleman that set up an encampment on his property. And business owner went out, asked him to, leave the parking lot. He wasn't welcome there to set up camp, and then he was threatened with a knife. It is a call that our officers do respond on pretty frequently. But like I said before, if it's business owner's property, then they have that recourse with the trespass ordinance and other things along those lines. But whenever it's on the public right of way, we don't always have that same course of action that we can take.
Okay.
Question. First of all, the question I had was, how often do you guys deal with this? And you just basically answered that quite frequently. Also, does this parallel other municipalities that you know of? And the objective is to what? Not make our city like that. I'm assuming. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, obviously there's a public health concern. So if you've ever seen any of the encampments, they can get pretty bad sometimes. So there's public health concern, there's public safety concern, because a lot of the people that are inhabiting these encampments do suffer with mental health issues or substance abuse issues, which can be a risk to just the normal general public that might be passing by. Another case in point, took an email from a resident this weekend who was trying to watch the Chiefs game last week, and he was over at Chapels out on their sidewalk furniture, just enjoying the day, and he commented how often he was approached and people were asking him for money. Had people that appeared to be unhoused that were sleeping on the furniture outside, but being asked for money, being asked for cigarettes, things along those lines. So it's just one of our residents trying to enjoy one of the local businesses, but still having to deal with some of those issues. I think it's important to note too that the enforcement action that we intend to take is, obviously the first contact with any individual. Ideally, there's no enforcement action. We inform them of the ordinance, we educate, and we offer services. And so it's not just there's no punitive enforcement right off the bat. So for anybody, we'd like to encourage them to get services to try and help them initially, but then the ordinance would give us some sort of enforcement if we needed to go that route. And then ideally also, if somebody were to be found in violation of the camping ordinance, that also puts them in contact with our municipal courts, where our municipal prosecutor, municipal judge could use the court system to try and encourage people to seek some of those other resources that are out there for them.
Also, you say you offer services usually. Other than medical services, what other are there other kind of services that we can point these people into and so forth, like for help if they need it?
Absolutely. There are a lot of shelters around the region that we reach out to. All of our officers have what they refer to as a street sheet. And so it's a street sheet that all of our officers have access to that they will hand out to individuals. That is just list of food resources, list of shelter resources, substance abuse resources, mental health resources. So that's something that our officers will refer back to whenever they're dealing with people, depending on what somebody's particular situation is, to try and get them in touch with the services they need. Unfortunately, what we find a lot of times, though, is that sometimes people just don't want those services. And so, our officers come into contact with many people where we will offer them a shelter. We will find an open shelter space for them. We'll offer to give them transportation to that shelter, and they refuse. There was actually, I was just reading a study that was done in Seattle and Portland recently, and what their officers found was whenever they were dealing with similar situations, 2 out of every 3 people that they offered shelter space to refused shelter space.
The goal of our committee is to make sure we're helping support our city work with underrepresented populations. The Houseless Committee is one of those populations. That being said, a lot of the services you're speaking of are not located in North Kansas City. How is this a policy that will not push people out of North Kansas City, but rather welcome them to the safe space we're trying to create?
Yeah, so unfortunately, you're right. There are not many resources available in North Kansas City right now, but as police department, we have to utilize what resources are available for us for those people. And so you have to make the determination, is it safer for somebody to set up an encampment where they're going to become reclusive and not have access to any services, maybe not seek services on their own, or to where we can get them outside of the city limits, not necessarily displaced, but somewhere where they are able to receive those services. Because I think we could agree that it doesn't do anybody any good if they continue to be reclusive in a campsite somewhere, rather than going out and having access to those services where they may not have necessarily been able to get on their own.
And do you have information? So one thing I saw this statement say is that the police department believes. I actually don't see any data in this write-up that supports that and shows us the actual statistics behind these statements. Where's the information that shows like the numbers you're talking about? Right now you've been talking about private property and responding to like the parking lot at Volcano. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pretty sure as soon as someone pulls a knife on someone else, that's actually not a matter of just being on someone else's property.
Right.
So you have different recourse. For someone being on public space, mm-hmm. not bothering anyone, or even if they are just making a lot of noise, whatever it may be, to me, this seems like pushing our houseless community out of North Kansas City without specific details, without specific numbers and data to support it. And as we've stood, as we've written our bylaws and our purpose of the committee, right now, this does not support this committee's goal and plans.
I can assure you, it's not about pushing them out. It's about the right-of-way in between maybe a business and a curb or a house's sidewalk and a curb. That's right-of-way, that's public property. And that's been one of the things is when tents start popping up in neighborhoods in between the sidewalk and the curb, we have no recourse. But we have received calls and concerns from businesses, especially down in the industrial area, with these activities on their sidewalks or right in front of their doorway and whatnot. But we have no recourse when it's on the sidewalk because it's public property and right-of-way. So they're just trying to find a way. Right. I know one of the other, I think, concerns was the levee district had talked about, there are some encampments down along the river, but then they're coming up through the levee or through the levee, across the levee into town, but they were clearing the large, I'd say rocks, riprap, to make a trail through there. Well, that degrades the levee. When it rains or whatever, it starts to erode the levee. So they were concerned about that, but again, we had no recourse because it's a public property, not a private property. So they're just areas, but like Justin said, the first thing is to offer the services. They've even gotten written in here, they can't issue a citation the first time unless I'd say, I don't know, gets out of hand, whatever the course is, but refuse to move and that. I mean, we can't force services on, but that's where this is all coming from. It's not a trying to push people out of town. It's just trying to add some safety
And what I didn't say was this is a forced effort to push people out of town. What you heard me say is there's no data supporting what you're saying is a huge problem. And because of that, right now it just reads like it's an effort to push a houseless population that we are here to represent. And especially by referring to our houseless population as thems and theys, that is, again, reinforcing that they are not part of our community, that a group of people are being othered again. And based on that, as a person of this community, that's a problem. And there will be no solution if we continue to other people who are underrepresented. And that is what I have a problem with.
I'm trying to just consider like all the parties involved, and I think, like you stated, you know, the directive of the committee is definitely to represent the underserved populations. I think we still owe, you know, considerable thought and consideration to the, you know, the folks who live / work / own property, and even simply visit, you know, the city, and what the actual update might be trying to do to help that. I think it would be helpful to consider solutions that, like you said, try not to other the, you know, the folks who this ordinance might be targeting a little bit. And I use targeting I'm not trying to say it's, you know, targeting, but I think that it is obviously written for a certain group of people who come to North Kansas City without much, right? Without a home, without probably much money, without a whole lot of hope even. But that being said, I think we would need to discuss solutions, right? I think our goal would be to offer solutions when things like this are put in place. So that being said, is there more feedback about the ordinance, or just thoughts like about how we could propose a solution, you know, to make this more inclusive with, you know, as part of our directive?
Well, I think that brings us to the question, what is the hope of getting feedback and solutions? Is the hope of just getting an opinion of a group that's focused on equity and inclusion?
I believe both. I mean, opinion, but of course would include feedback and whatnot. The goal is to take this back to the council, but as I said, it was requested that it come through EIC first before it goes back.
I had a quick question. You mentioned earlier that one of the things you offer is transportation. Is that something you're able to offer consistently? Like, do the officers, like, for example, if someone would take you up on the offer to go to a shelter, are you guys able to transport them consistently?
So our officers very frequently will provide transportation many places in the metro. We have individuals that will directly come into our lobby. We have individuals that will directly come into our lobby that we'll find shelter space for. And then we also, you know, we transport often. Yeah. And as long as there's staffing available, you know, our officers make every effort to get somebody to a safe space whenever it's available for them and they're willing to go.
What are your primary, oh my gosh, I like completely blanked on the word. What are the primary shelters you tend to send individuals of the houseless community in North Kansas City to? Do you focus on like right across the river? Do you just find what has an available bed?
Well, unfortunately, shelter space is very limited in the Kansas City metro. I mean, much like the mental health resources that we have available to us, they're all very limited resources, and so we utilize anything available. Obviously, ideally, shelter spaces just, you know, within close proximity to North Kansas City would be the best option for us, because that way, obviously, somebody's found their way to North Kansas City, so we're not trying to push them further out, but we do need to get them to a safe place for the evening. So we start close, and then, you know, we'll have to kind of cast our net wider as we're not able to find space. Obviously within reason, you know, we're not taking anybody several towns away just to find a shelter. So, I mean, if that was the only shelter available, we would. I think we transported to Harrisonville before. I mean, just because, you know, that's better than staying on the street for the night, especially in inclement weather. So.
What other resources do you focus on after you've kind of used all of your shelter spaces or shelter recommendations?
What
So
do you mean by-
if the goal is to find shelter or like a place for the night for our individuals that have set up camps or encampments on private property, public property, whatever you find, if you've looked at shelter space and know where's available, where do you go to next to find them a safe space for the evening?
Sure. So our officers have a protocol that if there are no available shelter spaces that we can utilize, then we will reach out to the Northland Assistance Center. Northland Assistance Center will provide vouchers. We have programs set up, or they have a program set up to where if our officers refer an individual to the NAC, then we can get them vouchers for the American Inn, so that we can get them a hotel room for the evening. And so that's once all available resources for shelters have been expended, then we are able to contact Northland Assistance Center to get somebody into a hotel.
As a follow-up question to something that Bess asked, is there any way that we could get that we could see an example of you mentioned a cheat sheet or a list of places and documents
sheet?
that, that the officers carry usually? Is there any way that we could get a list of those things?
Absolutely.
So we'd know?
I mean,
Would I just go maybe over to the desk or something like that, or you could provide that for us?
Yeah, I can get it all for you at the end of the meeting.
I think right now, like, as this reads, it's not solutions-oriented. I think the information you just shared is going to be vital in, like, trying to convey information that's not just move them out. And what the protocol is, because right now I don't know it. And I think I'm, like, a pretty involved citizen that's pretty well educated within our our social services system within North Kansas City, as well as the Kansas City proper area. But if I know, if I have lots of resources that I already know about, but it's not conveyed here, I think that's a major misstep.
If I may, so the ordinance where it talks about they'll offer services and whatnot, ordinance is kind of the broad, this is what they'll do. Then the police department has, I'll call it standard operating procedures that spell out how they carry that out. So that's not necessary. I mean, they wouldn't put every single step on, on how to in here, just that they will do the services, but then the officers will have their operating procedures for such. I mean, if that helps. Maybe not.
I think if you're trying to get buy-in from people, like letting them know what the system is you're trying to get their opinion from is important.
So, do you mean put it in the ordinance or information to you all as you consider this? As you're talking about
as we consider it, as well as as you're sharing it with people that you're going to get to vote on it, those pieces of information are critical. Because right now, as I'm reading it, I'm like, absolutely not. This just forces people out. But if I know the procedure and say oh, okay, well then you're going shelters first, that makes absolute sense. The next step is Northland Assistance, which we know is a great resource in North Kansas City. And it sounds like that's your last step and there's no barriers there. So I'm assuming from what you've shared with me, there's anyone who needs a bed for the night is going to get a bed. You didn't mention any financial limit on that. So now I've gone from being absolutely opposed to now I'm willing to open the conversation. But I needed that context.
right. That's a program the city funds through Northland Assistance Center to an amount. So yeah, for inclement weather. I think it's inclement weather, and there are other situations.
Yeah, we've used it most often for inclement weather, but we've even used it for people that have been discharged from the hospital that may be not from this area, and they're waiting on family members or somebody that's able to transport them back to wherever they live. And so we're able to put them up in a hotel for 2-3 days even, to where they've got time to have that transportation get to them and then take it back to their home.
I think, yeah, I mean, my takeaway is that I've learned a lot just from what your all's protocols are, and that's comforting that we have, I think, a thoughtful police department that does have a process in there. And I think, like Beth said, it gives us a little more of an idea of how we relocate folks with this newer, and we'll call it definitely more restrictive policy on folks who don't have traditional housing, right? I think that's kind of the paradox we live in when you have a nice city with a lot of nice resources, and from that comes, you know, team members like you and departments like yours that are trying to help and have enough time even to, you know, create solutions for that. And I think that does come from, right, having good businesses, having, yeah, just things that people want to take part in. So that's the paradox, and that's what we struggle with. I think that's why our committee exists. So thanks for letting us grill you and ask you questions, because it's really important to get those answers so we can consider everything. Any other questions? Really appreciate you being here, especially so late. So. I would recommend that we all kind of sit on this, write down some thoughts. I mean, I really think, at least for me, writing things down is really important to reflect on. So if we can come back next time, maybe. I know it's a work session, so I probably can't add anything to the next agenda, but we could just gather our thoughts and kind of revisit this.
When is this being presented to City Council?
Oh, the goal was on the 24th, but that won't happen now. I mean, that was the thought, was bring it here tonight, discuss it, and then take it on the 24th. But we'll hold off on that. I think the next meeting is October. I don't know. I gotta think what the 8th,
Oh, the second
10th.
Tuesday.
The
first Tuesday?
the next EIC meeting would
Gotcha.
be would be October 10th. So that'd push to
Easy to remember.
the 15th. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, we appreciate you guys, letting us do that.
Is there direction? I mean, that's, I guess, for the next meeting, for the 10-10 meeting, or do you guys, I mean, or are we waiting for recommendations back from EIC, or just to, I want to make sure I don't drop a ball on anything.
Go ahead.
I feel like I've had the most pushback on this, which I'm fine with. A lot of my work with EIC is to find holes in it and to train people up on how to look at things. I would say my biggest recommendations, I don't need time on it, I've looked at it and I've thought about it a lot, is right now it reads as pushing people away. I would change verbiage. I would also consider sharing what the protocols are, as well as if the intention is to relocate people from public spaces, then that needs to be part of the plan for NAC. Because right now we're talking about just inclement weather. Well, tonight's going to be a pretty nice night. Would tonight count as a night for a voucher night? Because if we're saving, you're saying no?
I don't believe so.
So that's
for what we, for other than hospital or, yeah.
So if there's no medical need, then you've said that if no shelters are available, then that's the next place you would go to. That actually doesn't align. And again, that heightens my level of concern. And I would absolutely go to my council people about that. I think those are my biggest pieces. And also adding in the data. Statements like, we believe, right now is an era of time where people are highly critical of our police officers. Not your fault. It is the problem of your career. And you don't deserve that. But the number one way of preventing that is by presenting the data with the calls you get. And I think specific areas of the city, you get the most calls in for public space and the number of calls you respond to on a weekly basis and when those calls are would be the most helpful for me as, again, a pretty informed citizen to see.
Are Are you saying to include in here or as part of presentation to city council when they make that presentation?
I would present it to city council that way. Like, I don't need to see it again. I think my opinion's been pretty clear. Like, those were the things that would get me much more on board.
I ask, I mean, I get what you're saying about Reed's is pushing people away. Do you have recommendations? I mean, I'm open to, and it doesn't have to be right now, but if you'd be willing to share, that would be much appreciated.
I think it's overall tone. It's a hidden message. Because it's clear the goal is they can't be on our streets. Houseless population, tent cities are not welcome on our streets. The inference there is they go somewhere else. We're not going to talk about where because it's not here. And we're not giving you that information, so we're going to sweep it under the rug. The more explicit you are, the less that's hidden. Not hiding things is the revolutionary act that gets people on your team. So I would say, like, the suggestion is clarity, like extreme clarity.
Would you be willing to send, I mean, recommended red line or
I mean,
additions?
I would put something as simple as North Kansas City Police have responded to X number of calls regarding people camping in public spaces. X number have been safety concerns, including like these type of weapons. These are the areas of town that are the most likely or have seen the most amount of calls. The plan for supporting people with the first education. Here are the things we educate on. Are in our first site or in our first interaction with someone who's been in these spaces, it is to do X, Y, and Z. After that, we then provide them with alternative housing for the evening or for however many days. By first recommending shelters, these are the shelters. With the shelter options, I think one thing to be very aware of is a lot of them are religious. A lot of our religious shelters are not safe spaces for a lot of our houseless communities. They're just not. And then the next steps are X, Y, and Z. We go to Northland Assistance. Once that's an actual thing we can promise people. A night like tonight, it sounds like we can't promise them that. So it sounds like there's not actual answers yet.
Well, and there's budgetary constraints, I mean, things to consider as well.
Right, but if you're saying to me, when I ask questions about it, yeah, we get them to Northland Assistance.
When we can, right.
When we can, but when do you get to decide that? I know there are rules about it.
Mm-hmm.
This temperature is too cold, this temperature is too hot.
Yeah,
People outside of these meetings don't necessarily know that.
right.
And if I'm being told, yeah, we want to keep them safe, we want to keep them in our town, but only if it's this cold or only if it's this hot, now my trust is broken. And we're not actually keeping people here, we're pushing them away. The term is radical transparency, is what I was looking for. I think the other piece of that transparency is it's clearly referring to our houseless population, but it's never mentioned. And then with the language you use to present to council, making sure you're very clear that it's not they, them, that you're not like talking about this population that exists somewhere in the cloud, that you're inclusive in that language as well.
And that could, I mean, I'm wondering, like, obviously the ordinance is written in a way, I mean, it doesn't say houseless population for a reason, right? It's talking about the acts. Right,
Anyone.
that are.
Right, anyone, right, there's I guess a person could tend to lean towards a vision when it's talked about, but it refers, I mean, it applies to everyone. Yeah.
So, yeah,
No.
think that's sometimes the hard part, right? Like, we
Mhm.
want to protect the folks that will probably be affected by this most, potentially, and, but at the same time, the ordinance itself needs to be written in a way that simply defines the things that are not going to be allowed. And I think to Bess's point, there is that potential, like, hidden agenda, if you will, or not quite transparent, but I don't know if the ordinance would ever be written in a way that says,
So here's the, like, I agree, it applies to everyone, but it doesn't. It applies to everyone, but the people who have a place to go to don't have anything to lose.
I understand, but I guess we're just saying when a law is written, a statute or an ordinance, it has to apply equally to everybody. I mean,
Correct.
we have to write it to apply to everybody.
But it's in the presentation that you're presenting to city council. So think about how you're presenting this to city council. This is how it's written, and here's how we're protecting our underrepresented communities. Because we know if someone decides to camp out on city streets who lives in the avenues, they're probably gonna go home to the avenues. Same for people who live in Northgate Village. Same people who live in the French Quarter. They're probably gonna go home to their bed at night. It's the underrepresented people in our city that we're really talking about, that don't have the other option. So how are we protecting everyone equally, even if they're not explicitly named in the ordinances? And that is what I care about.
Oh, yeah.
good discourse, I think. Thank you. And then anything else? Just to kind of, I guess, put a bow on it. I know. Well, yeah, you're right. It wasn't going to be tied very nicely, but it was going to be a bow. All right. Well, cool. So we can, I think, move to our sixth item. Major Holm, I don't know if you have some, if you want to leave, you're welcome to, but I don't know if there's anything else with that particular part of the agenda, so. But, cool. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sticking around. So I know many of us have been looking at the municipal code language, which is kind of a nice segue just from what we were just talking about. Bess, I think you might have been gone for a couple of those meetings, but did you have a chance to look at that? It was cool. I had a feeling you'd be ambitious enough to do so even. Yeah, any feedback so far? I know I did some searches of my own, and I mean, doing searches of keywords that you're looking for definitely comes up with a few red flags, but did anyone find anything of note that they want to start a discussion about?
I know we've talked multiple times about the fact that there's just a lot of gendered language throughout the whole thing that could probably be changed. Wouldn't be like a massive change to the document in general, but would be a really easy way to make the whole document feel a lot more inclusive. So just a lot more of that throughout the whole thing.
I agree. That was my biggest thing, personally.
There's also language that has been updated in, I really hate this sentence, but in more woke circles, for lack of a better term, referring to cannabis as marijuana has roots in racism that I'd like to see updated. And then as well as like a peeping Tom. I don't know if we call people, like I'm sure we call people peeping Toms, but like I feel like that's like almost antiquated language now.
Yeah.
So just like older language that needs to be updated.
For sure. And Marcia had done quite a bit of help with this, and she had some help with, I believe, of her sister, who was doing some work with her just to give some recommendations on how to update the language as efficiently as possible. So I was hoping she'd be here for that. But ultimately, I mean, I think, with this big undertaking, our goal was to take recommendations to the council, and to go back to what I said earlier, a nice little bow on this, maybe. We could just get together and put a red line document together, or at least a really nicely worded, referral for what we think should happen. But I think that would be the next step, and I would like to do that during a work session, if that's something we could propose at this point. Is that allowed we could put together a work session? Cool. I mean, does anyone feel like dedicating a couple hours to this, like on a weekend or on a weekday night of some sort would be attainable?
Yeah.
I think if we could do it before our next meeting, that would be awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, I think while we're looking at it then, how does Saturday the 28th look for everyone?
What time of day?
10 worked really well, at least for me, last time we did it. So like doing just a 10 or even 9 to 11, just a couple hours in that morning.
You guys are more than welcome to do it. It is the final current game of
Ooh,
the season,
okay.
and I will be taking my daughter for her birthday.
That's pretty fun.
Oh, it's going to be very fun.
Can I come?
If
Instead,
you want to
no,
buy
just-
yourself a ticket,
that
it's
sounds
with
awesome.
Gotham. It'll be a great game.
Okay, well, let's not say the 28th in that case.
Is there anyone a weeknight is out for? Like, absolutely cannot do weeknights.
I can definitely do weeknights.
I can do weeknights, yeah.
Me too. Okay.
Can't usually do Thursdays, but other than that, I'm good.
As you're here on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Any nights of the week that are absolutely out?
Friday.
Fair.
Yeah, Friday, that's fair.
So we got Friday,
9
we got Thursday. Mondays are
Thursday's
particularly
good.
hard for me.
9:26 works for me.
What about Wednesdays and Tuesdays?
Yeah.
They're
Wednesday or Tuesday. Yeah, I mean, really, Monday through Thursday is good.
great. I have my work late night is Mondays, so. I'm just gonna propose, I feel like this is a dangerous date, Tuesday the 24th.
I've got nothing.
Then are you all gonna meet, like, library again or somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be the plan.
Yeah, we have normally our council meeting is the third Tuesday, but a lot
Okay.
of us are gone next week for a conference, including the mayor. So our meeting's the 24th in here, just to make sure. All right.
Hopefully, there will be a lot of productivity in North Kansas City that night then. Because, yeah, that works for me. 24th, what do you think, Martin?
24th works for me. What time are we talking about?
6:30-ish? Sound good?
Strong incentive to get done quickly.
Okay, let's do 6:30.
I might be a little late, but I can do that.
Yes.
You said at the library?
Yes.
Okay, I'll have that, it'll be posted on the website, just.
Great. Yep,
Who's gonna reserve the space?
I can do that.
You sure?
Yep. I think it closes at 9. Is that? So maybe 6:30 to 8:30. And hopefully, we'll finish faster than that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Hopefully, we can relay that to Saper. He was helpful when we were doing that last time, but he'll be here,
He
so
won't
I
be
guess,
able
yeah,
to. Yeah.
that's okay. But I was just thinking of him because the next item is the liaison update. Hopefully, we'll see him soon. It's been too long, really, with our meetings getting canceled. Any announcements from anyone?
Marcia and I were at the Bounce and Balance event. We had a little table there, which was very fun. We got to talk to a lot of people, which was neat. But while Marcia and I were talking, she mentioned to me that she lives in, I can't remember which apartment she lives in, but she said she does not get the North Kansas City newsletter. And we brought it up with Councilman Saper, and he was not aware of that either. And we were not aware who gets it and who doesn't. Yeah.
I think she lives on the other side of,
Backyard, I believe.
Yeah.
The backyard apartment.
yeah. And then I have a coworker who also lives over there, and I don't even think she knows to get the text alerts.
Yeah,
So I had to tell her about the boil water notice.
oh, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, she was saying that's like not even they even have like space in their elevator and like space in their lobby. It's not posted in either of those places. So we were just not sure where it's distributed and if there's whole complexes or whole areas that don't get it. Because like she didn't know about the Bounce and Balance event other than hearing about it here, if that makes sense. Because I just mentioned in passing, like, oh, I saw it in the newsletter. And she's like, what newsletter are you talking about? And that's how we got on the topic.
This is usually a mail thing, a postal service thing, isn't it? The newsletter?
Do we send to the apartments?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did the same.
So, backyard, we have a list when we do mailings, and apparently backyards and maybe Millhouse and other new ones weren't added to the list, but now we have a new list that has been updated.
Okay, great.
We'll double check.
Cool. Thank
But
you.
yeah,
Would there be a way to do like this big poster size thing for their lobbies instead of individual mailers? Or in addition to individual mailers? I don't know what the budget is for like mailers and posters for city. I just think that might be a more efficient way of alerting things to our like big
Well,
apartment
we
buildings
could-
now
I
that
mean-
we have some.
or going further, I mean, something that says, hey, here's where you can sign up for all these different things, yeah. Yeah, not only newsletters, but weekend review and Textcaster, you can sign up for different announcement, yeah. It's a good
Especially
idea.
as the reminders for the survey are coming out.
Mhm.
I know I got my text like the other day.
Mhm.
Are we still in announcements?
Mhm.
Is it gonna set?
Yeah.
Hey, Megan, could you do something beautiful for Hispanic Heritage Month? The answer is no, that's okay. I can figure something out.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. And Indigenous Peoples Day?
Double yes.
Okay, I'm trying to think if there's any other things to celebrate between now and like the next time we meet. I think that's it.
It's nice to be able to ask that and just know you're going to get incredible work back.
Usually it comes across that way.
I know. Very simple request, but very thoughtful results and beautiful results. That's awesome. It's a little portfolio for Megan to share with her next. Her next. Oh yeah, yeah. You're staying here. Yeah, we'll be at a loss. Great. Well, again, big thank you, Major Justin, for coming today and for sharing all that. I think it was really informative for sure. And thank you, Bess, for having good questions that keep our committee honest and definitely moves, what we're doing forward. So cool. Well, everybody, thank you so much. We'll adjourn at 7:52. Call it a night.